So most ACL tears are non-contact. About
Mm,
75% of ACL tears are non-contact. And then within that, so that means you're not taking a hit, right? It's really just you're stepping wrong, you're planting wrong, and you just tear through that ACL. And so really looking at that, and now a lot of the research that's coming out is showing between 70 and 80% within of individuals after a concussion within a year will have a lower extremity injury. So that's where a lot of that comes, where if you lose that motor control, that spatial awareness, that ability to make a quick reaction, then you put yourself in a vulnerable position and then you can't support yourself.
Welcome to Take Back My Brain with Laurie Hammer, where real healing starts in the brain. I'm Laurie, a functional nutritionist and mom who's walked the path from anxiety and burnout to clarity and calm. Each week, we're going to dive into brain-based tools like amino acid therapy, gut health, fasting, and faith to help you reclaim your energy, emotions, and sense of self. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Take Back My Brain. I'm your host, Laurie Hammer, and today I have with me Dr. Joe O'Toole from Des Moines, Iowa. So he is in my neck of the woods, so I'm super excited to have him today. He is a board certified functional neurologist, and he specializes in neuro rehabilitation, functional neurology, and holistic approaches to brain health. So I love everything that he's doing. He's my jam. We're going to have an amazing conversation today. And I cannot wait to hear your story, how you got into chiropractic care. But Dr. Joe, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Lori.
Yeah, it's great. So you said in your information you sent me that your experience began in high school with football. So with this whole neurology thing, was that a concussion that happened?
Yeah, so kind of my story. I grew up in a family with 8 boys,
Oh,
one
wow.
girl.
God bless your
So
mom.
yeah, she was a nurse by trade. So she ended up staying home with us because there was enough nursing at home that needed to be done with 8 boys.
Definitely.
So
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
yep. So I had a concussion from an older brother, but it actually didn't create any long-term effects for me personally. But then I had a younger brother. I played high school sports and did all the stuff. But then a younger brother of mine that I actually practice with now, we're both board certified in neurology, but he had a concussion in high school, and
Mm.
I was coaching football at that time. I'm helping coach his team. I'd gotten into coaching, and so he had a pretty significant concussion, went undiagnosed, didn't get pulled from the game, all the
Wow.
stuff that happened at that era,
Yeah.
and then about 3 months late, 5 months later, he ended up tearing his ACL. He ended up having two torn ACLs, and
Oof.
that's kind of where we didn't initially connect it to the concussion, but then now years later, that's kind of come back around, and we started to understand that. But so that's kind of where my interest started lying. Was I was coaching high school football, and then I was working with special needs adults,
Mm.
and I thought I was gonna actually go to school for, teaching special ed, but then, God kinda had another path for me, kinda wound around and went into chiropractic and mostly focused on more sports med, sports rehabilitation with that. And so then when I was out into practice, I started coaching, at my local high school here in Des Moines, and so I was coaching there for about 4 years and just seeing a lot of the concussions that were happening and being mistreated.
Yeah.
And one real pivotal moment for me was during one morning during our coaches meeting after a game. We got our injury report and we had 17 suspected head or neck injuries, which was kind
Holy
of code
cow.
for suspected concussion. And we had a team of
Wow.
about 55, 60 players. So I'm thinking
Oh my
statistically
gosh.
that is impossible. And so that's what kind of then led into, okay, if something needs to be done, and so with that, I need to go back to school. So then my brother and I, again, because of his history with concussion and his interest in that, we went back to school and did 3 years of postdoctorate in clinical neurology through the
Wow.
Carrick Institute, and then did 2 years of fellowship in concussion rehabilitation. And then because of as we were going through that, then my daughter started having some pretty severe behavioral issues that were tied into some neurology that was happening.
Wow.
And so as we were searching for answers, I ended up doing another 6 months in pediatric developmental disorders. So that's kind of been my journey, is just more out of necessity, both for
Mhm.
myself, my players, my brother, family members, my daughter, and so that's then what's led us to practicing neurology.
Yeah, that's an amazing story. You know, God takes all the mess that we have, all the challenges, and he works it out for good. I love it. So I would love to go back to, and I know listeners will be like, what? HCL or ACL and concussion? Like, can you connect those dots for us?
Yeah, so a lot of people really struggle to make that connection of how does doing something to my knee, how does that come from my brain?
Right.
And when you look at the mechanism of concussion, a couple of things that really happen with a concussion. One is you start to lose proprioceptive or spatial awareness, and and so you lose the ability both to understand where your body's located, and then also quick reaction time gets diminished. And so most ACL tears are non-contact. About
Mm,
75% of ACL tears are non-contact. And then within that, so that means you're not taking a hit, right? It's really just you're stepping wrong, you're planting wrong, and you just tear through that ACL. And so really looking at that, and now a lot of the research that's coming out is showing between 70 and 80% within of individuals after a concussion within a year will have a lower extremity injury.
really? How
Yeah,
interesting.
so that's where a lot of that comes, where if you lose that motor control, that spatial awareness, that ability to make a quick reaction, then you put yourself in a vulnerable position, and then you can't support yourself once you're in that position, and then it's just very easy for the forces to kind of tear through the
Sure.
ACL.
Well, that makes complete sense. And how many decades has it been like to connect those dots since people started playing sports?
Right. Yeah. Well, and what's interesting is even then, just last night, I was having a conversation with a mother of a patient that just started coming seeing us. He had Division 1 offers for football, ended up getting those pulled because the start of his senior year, he had a concussion, recovered from that, didn't think anything of it, and then within about 4 weeks, he had an ACL tear,
Ooh.
and so he got most of his Division 1 offers pulled. He's now going Division 2. But then, so we were talking with his mom, and she started putting that piece together, and she does some strengthening and conditioning for some schools in the
Uh-huh.
area, and she's starting to see this pattern. She had just said, she's like, just in the last 2 weeks since you guys mentioned that, I'm seeing these athletes that I'm working with that have had a head injury, and within a few months they have either an ACL or an ankle or something pretty severe.
Yeah, and I mean, I look at all of the kids, just even around town, like, how can all of you tear so many things? Like, it never happened, when I was growing up, and I'm not saying nobody ever got a concussion because I'm sure we did, but just like nobody had surgery. Like, it feels like it's like an epidemic right now. Like, what do you think? What other things could have shifted?
So that's where I actually exploring a little bit into why we might see an elevated rise in rates of concussion. I think
Hmm.
there's two factors. One is we're getting better awareness and better understanding, and maybe some better diagnostic, although I would argue our diagnostic isn't better. We're just actually looking for it more.
Yeah.
So I think that's one reason for the increased rates of concussion. The second reason actually though is if you look at the change in lifestyle and you look at some of the risk factors for concussion, the number one risk factor for a concussion is a previous concussion, just like any
Sure.
injury, right?
Right.
But other than a previous concussion, the single greatest risk factor for a concussion is neck strain, which again, most people are sitting there thinking, how do you get a head injury from a weak neck?
Hmm.
And so that's where, but the statistics are pretty clear that that's a factor. So that's one component of it, and I'm gonna come back to that in just a second.
Okay.
A second component with the lifestyle that also ties in is when we were doing our fellowship training in concussion rehab, we started asking the question, okay, everybody's looking at how to treat a concussion, but very few people are actually looking at how to prevent a concussion. How can you reduce
Mm.
your risk for it? And so we started doing some research and looking for individuals that were asking that question. And we came across Dr. Joe Clark at the University of Cincinnati and did some of our training under him, and he's cut the concussion rates on the Cincinnati football team by 80%.
Wow.
And this
That's
is published data.
phenomenal.
Yeah, and so we started looking at, okay, why is he doing that? So we went and we started shadowing him and spending time learning from him. And what he's doing primarily is working on neuro-visual training and working on how the eyes are both having better discipline, but better processing speeds of processing, and the ability then to see what's happening before it's too late to make a response to it. And
Mm,
so when you start tying those two mechanisms together, you start to say, okay, and they're improving their peripheral field of vision by about 15 degrees. So they can see more of what's happening, and when they can see more of what's happening, when these players can then brace and protect themselves from that, they can engage their neck faster, and they don't get this whipping mechanism, and most concussions now are viewed more as that whipping, that
sure.
acceleration, deceleration that's happening, and so with that, now you're able to actually protect yourself. So with that, when you tie in that visual component and the cervical component as huge risk factors for a
Right.
concussion, then you can start playing that back into lifestyle and saying, so what's changing and happening in our lifestyle that may be making us more prone to a head injury? What are we doing that's making us have weaker necks, and our vision is less, not just acute from our eyes, but less accurate with our vision.
Sure.
And you start to see this rise in screen time. You
Mm,
start to see this rise in indoor activities, a decrease in physical activities, exercise, play outside, all these things that we did growing up,
yeah.
where in a farm with 7 brothers, we were outside playing football in the snowdrift. We were
Right.
outside hours a day. Now it's you're inside, you're on a screen, you're sitting in a classroom on a screen, you start seeing this forward head drift like this. Once you get that forward head drift, now you're leaving yourself prone to more of a whipping mechanism. And
Sure.
so you gain your visual field to be very acute in this space instead of this space. You start having that forward head carriage, and then you're just setting yourself up really prone for injury.
Right. So, how do you prevent that?
Good question. So first off, just like any injury, you can't fully prevent it. I'm very big on semantics. You can't necessarily prevent it, but you can reduce your risk factor.
Okay. Yep.
Okay. And so you can reduce your risk. And really the two biggest ways, if you're playing sports, the two biggest ways are going to be to work on improving your visual control. And there's lots of different visual exercises and different things that we do here clinically to work on that. So working on improving your visual control, and then improving neck strength. And so that's from an athlete standpoint. When we take athletes through any programming to reduce their risk, a lot of that's training their eyes and training their neck.
Mm,
Now, when it comes to more of a general population, there's a couple of different factors that you can look at. One is getting off of the screens, getting up, getting active, being physically healthy. Those are some of the biggest factors in helping reduce your risk for either a concussion or a severe response to a concussion.
mm, yeah. Yeah. Those make a
So
big difference.
it's interesting because a lot of times we make health very complex, and
Mm-hmm.
health is actually very simple. Health is hard work, especially because of the way our lifestyle and our society
Right.
is set it up for ease and comfort. It can be hard work, but it's actually very simple where you eat properly, where you're not over consuming toxic levels of whether it's dyes and artificial foods and processed foods and all that stuff, but you're making sure you're getting enough of good resources in your diet. Same thing with exercise, and you're not getting too much sedentary lifestyle. You're getting good recovery and rest. All of those things is actually very simple.
Can't be that simple, Joe.
You'd be surprised. It's the research backs it up.
I know. I know. It's amazing, right? Just get some good sleep, get some good exercise, stop eating crap, and you reduce your risk of like 80% of 90% of everything that's going around.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know why we're addicted to convenience, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to put it.
Yeah. Cause it's so easy to run through, even if you pick the Chipotle restaurant as opposed to McDonald's, it's still not fantastic food.
Right, you're not getting that nutrient density
We're
as
not
that
getting the
you
nutrient
would.
density. Yeah, that is for sure. I was thinking as you're talking about this, I was thinking about my daughter. She's had 3 concussions.
Mhm.
And first one she had when she was 6, a kid tried to hurdle her. We were doing a homeschool play at a building in center. He missed the hurdle
Uh-huh.
and he caught his knee under her chin and sent her into the cement and like knocked her out cold. So that was bad. She
Yeah.
lost like all of her ability to read and math skills at that point
Mhm.
in time. And it took us a long time because I didn't know functional neurology at that point in time. I didn't know, anybody to take her to. So we did the best I could. I bought an
Sure.
AccuScope machine, I did cranial sacral, we did chiropractic, we did a lot of stuff.
Yes.
Um, and then we've kind of like thought, hey, we're good. And then she was riding a horse, and then the horse, she went over the fence and the horse didn't go over the fence. And so, so we've had some interesting things. We've really active kids, and
Uh-huh.
still have the concussions anyway. But she's 19 now, and she got smacked in the face 'cause she plays co-ed volleyball every
Mhm.
week, and she got hit in the face, and she's like, I'm fine. We checked her eyes, did all the things that I know now as a mom,
Yep.
and it was fine. But like 2 days later, I was like, you're like off emotionally. And
Yes.
she just couldn't, she couldn't like think what to do next, you know?
Mhm.
And so when you say, once you've had one, it makes you more susceptible, if you get hit in the head and stuff like that. And I feel like we do all the right things, 'cause she goes to hyperbaric, she does the crane. I mean, she still does all the
Mhm.
things. And
Mhm.
so when we say prevent, like when you're talking about the semantics, like can't prevent that from it. But I feel like this week she's pretty good because she's done all the things. But um
Mhm.
things still happen. Hey, friend, just a quick break to remind you if calming your brain is the missing piece in your practice or in your home, my Mind Thrive certification course teaches you exactly how to do that with targeted amino acid therapy. So it's real science, real results, no band aids. Enrollment is now open. Link is in the show notes. So back to the show.
Yeah, they do. Yep, they do, and that's where I often encourage my patients that we're not going to live a cautious life, right? We're
Yeah.
not going to sit back and do nothing because that's actually counterproductive. And even a lot of the research that's emerging is showing the two greatest things that you can do. And these are actually significant misconceptions that I deal with all the time. In the acute phase of a concussion, within like the first week, two of the best things that you can do, one is sleep. Like sleep as much as you can. You don't need to wake
Yep.
somebody up unless they're projectile vomiting and there's
Yeah.
severe signs, but you're not guessing at those. Those are obvious, very severe signs where it's like, okay, you go into the hospital for that. But otherwise, sleep. Sleep is the best recovery that you can have for the brain after an acute injury. And then the second thing is active active engagement, and primarily walking, like a brisk walk
Mm-hmm.
is one of the best things that you can do within that week is just getting up and going for longer walks. And so if you can do those two things, you start stimulating the brain, but then you also give it the time to recover with the sleep. And so those are really the best two things that you can do is engaging those two mechanisms.
Yeah, and I think that's key for anything, right? You get sleep and you get
Mhm.
movement. So if you have
Yep.
something going on, you can't repair if you're not doing either one of those.
Right. And
Yeah,
so that's where we're trying to encourage people, okay, you need to start getting back into living, not
right.
just sit back and do nothing. And so if you have too much of a cautious approach, you want to be safe, but also you want to start getting back into living life.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I would love you to dive into what is functional neurology as opposed to basic chiropractic care or, a neurologist who's not functional.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. So the difference between I'll start with the functional neurology versus more traditional medical neurology is medical neurology is looking for pathologies, and
Mhm.
and so it's looking for like, is there a stroke, is there a tumor, do we start to see more advanced stages of disease, MS, Alzheimer's, those kinds of things where you can take an image and you can see, oh, there's actual physical shrinkage of the brain.
Sure.
Okay. That's more end stage. That's things are the house is already consumed with fire, right?
Yep.
It's
Yep.
pretty advanced. That's what medical neurology is primarily looking at. And the primary intervention that a medical neurologist has is medications or then referral for surgery. Functional neurology is really looking at the brain less of a mechanical nature, more less of a machine, and more of a network model. So think of more like a computer network where you have nodes of communication that has to communicate back and forth. And that's what a functional neurologist is really going to look
Mm.
at. And kind of the way that we're looking at the brain is we're looking at this is a little bit simplified, but it's actually a really good analogy is the brain is receiving sensory information from all of its senses, our eyes, ears, nose, tongue, right? All the five senses, the spectral senses, and then proprioception from your joints and muscles, from your body inside of you. And it's trying to match all of that up and process all that information and then create a response to the environment around you. And so that's how the brain works. And so what we're looking at is how can we utilize various sensory inputs to change and create neuroplasticity so that
Mm.
the brain can work more efficiently.
Mhm.
And so that's where our training as a chiropractic neurologist or a functional neurologist is. So after our chiropractic degree, after any primary medical degrees, we had medical doctors, we had chiropractors, we had PTs, we had kind of the full gamut within our program. Then after that, then is postdoctorate work, and so that's about 3 years of work, and then board certification, and then fellowship trainings on top of that. And
Right.
so that's where it's different than even standard chiropractic is. There's a lot more education that goes on top of your degree. Chiropractic is wonderful because you can get some really good effects on the brain through joint input.
Right.
But then within our training, within the fellowship training for concussions, about 3/4 of it was in the visual system.
Wow.
And so I never planned on being an eye doctor, but I've actually had way more training on the visual system. And when you start to understand that about 85% of the brain is involved in vision, and that vision is more than just your eyes, then you start to see, oh, this is actually a really good way to intervene in the brain. And
Mhm.
so use different modalities, whether you're looking at visual exercises, you're looking at vestibular exercises, you're looking at proprioceptive, you're looking at autonomic and dysautonomia types of processes. So really it's looking at how can we create sensory input to change how the brain is integrating the signal so that it can create a better response to the environment around it.
I love it.
So,
I love it. Earlier in the podcast, you mentioned your daughter and kind of diving into that pediatric neurology as well. Can you kind of share what that looks like for kids and what you're seeing?
yeah, so one of the trends in pediatric neurology, especially when you're looking more at a functional approach, when you're looking at that, one of the main trends is primitive reflexes and looking at primitive reflexes. And really, primitive reflexes are this reflex, kind of like with your tendon reflex when you tap it, it kind of gives that little kick,
Mhm.
right? We have these reflexes that are supposed to be very metabolically efficient, where it doesn't take a lot of energy and metabolism to make something happen. And so there's these different reflexes. There's a visual reflex where as you quickly turn your head to one side, your eyes get pushed to the opposite side. That's called a vestibular ocular reflex. So that now I can keep good stability in my eyes. Primitive reflexes are actually supposed to happen primarily within the birth process and the really early stages of life to help babies survive before they can actually
Mm.
process the environment around them. So think of like going through the birth canal. The baby doesn't plan that. It just naturally happens, right? They kind of tuck their head around and their
Right.
shoulders. And that works very naturally with the mom's body to then create this very smooth birth process. And then you've got other primitive reflexes like the sucking or rooting reflex where like you kind of tap their cheek and they kind of turn and it's
Mhm.
to help them find a food source, right? And
Right.
so these primitive reflexes are supposed to be there in the very early stages of life. And then within 9 months, most of the time, those should be gone. So and those kind of get remediated through learning how to move and learning how to engage at a higher level. And so from a pediatric standpoint, there's been this heavy emphasis on improving primitive reflexes. So we do some with that, but we actually take it a lot further because of our background in concussion rehab.
Oh,
And
uh-huh.
so because of that, now we bring a lot of more advanced, both from a visual and vestibular standpoint, and then also from cognitive training that we've done again for that concussion. So we're looking at building from, okay, are these reflexes working well? Now is the visual system working well? And now are the cognitive systems working well? And so kind of building that pyramid off of it. And when you start to understand that the brain is this small little organ that takes up very little space, but the amount of work that it does is almost incomprehensible. But the way that you're able to process all of this emotional and relational interpretations and all this physical responsibility, everything that the brain does is you start to see that all of these pathways actually have overlapping functions.
Mm.
And so if a certain pathway in your brain is there to, let's say, stop an eye movement, so if I see something moving over here in my periphery, my eyes want to go towards that, right?
Right.
But if but then I've got my frontal system that's stopping my eye from moving that way and saying, no, I need to look over in that other direction.
Mm.
That same circuitry is actually engaging from an emotional responsiveness. And so we work with a lot of kids that have kind of this behavioral tantrum outburst, this
Yeah.
emotional dysregulation where they can't stop themselves from responding a certain way. And then after the fact, then they're like, I didn't want to do that. I just couldn't stop myself. And a lot of times you'll find it in that similar, okay, this frontal system, it's not working. You'll see their eyes aren't engaging like that. And then this frontal system is not working, and you'll see that emotional dysregulation tied into that. So you've got this overlapping circuitry between emotional regulation and physical regulation.
Mm,
And so that's where we can kind of start leaning into addressing both physical thinking things like discoordination, fine
yeah.
motor skill issues, things like that. But then also you talk about issues like PANS and PANDAS
Yeah.
that are coming up. That's a sensitized immune response, right? Because of strep infection, but also you're creating this sensitized neurological system, and so then you're getting this dysregulated behavior because they're not able to get into some of those higher centers of their thinking. And
Right.
so being able to work kind of on that level, I love working with functional medicine because you can address kind of that over responsive immune response on the functional medicine side, but then you can work on the regulation from the neurological side. And so being able to address kind of both of those angles, you're able to help with some of this emotional dysregulation.
Right. Can you give us an example of like one of your patients, how this helped? Like
Yeah,
one
I
of the
mean,
kids? Yeah.
yeah, so I mean, my daughter, I'll just share her story. This is what got me into and so passionate about working with kids. Is she was about 3, 4 years old, and she was sweetest little child. I mean, just very relationally engaged. And then she started having these issues, and we were noticing some emotional dysregulation initially a little bit, but then she started getting all these rashes all over her body,
Mm,
and so we kind of did the initial stages of some elimination diet, removing dyes, removing gluten, some of the major triggers, and within about 4 weeks, the rash went away. I took her on a daddy date and gave her some pancakes, and within about 5 minutes, she was in the car seat, tearing her hair out, slamming her head against the car seat,
oh,
and that was kind of her behavior for almost a year and a half.
wow.
Where it was just constantly she would sit on my wife's lap, and my wife would have to hold her to calm her down, and she'd just be talking to her, and she's like, "Okay, this is a peaceful environment. Things You're safe. Things are calm. Jesus is here, wants to bring peace." And she'd look at my wife, look her in the eyes, and say, "I don't want Jesus. I want Satan." And then she'd start
Mm,
slamming her head into the walls, and just, I mean, just, and we're like, I know intuitively this is not because we're bad parents.
right.
Right, and I know intuitively that this is also not because she's a bad child that just wants
Right.
to rebel.
Right.
This is not how a rebellious child works. They don't slam their head into the wall. And so that's what we actually that's kind of what led me into the pediatric neurology was her. And so then we as I was learning, I was starting to implement a lot of the techniques that I was learning and working through some treatment with her on that. And that's kind of what then we created some programming around that to help other kids. But to this day, she was not sleeping through the night. She'd wake up just screaming with night terrors. She started sleeping through the night within she was 7 years old and still wetting the bed.
Mhm.
And I was doing all the things that usually work, but they weren't working with her. And
Yeah.
within about 2 weeks of starting to do some of the neuro training, the visual training, some of the things that we were doing, within about 2 weeks, she quit wetting the bed and has not wet
Mm,
since. She started sleeping through the night. She's at peace. She's able to regulate herself. She's stopped slamming her head into the walls. She's not a destructive child anymore. And
right.
and that's what then led me to say, okay, there's more kids that need this,
Oh my
and there's
gosh,
parents
yeah.
that are struggling because they know they're a good parent and their child is a good child, but
Yeah.
they can't find answers for that. And so yeah, we work with kids all the time that similar things, whether it's one of the kids that we saw initially, he was having kind of similar, more depressive type symptoms though. He was, I believe he was 9 years old, and getting into third, fourth grade, couldn't read at a first grade level,
Mm,
was starting to really struggle with identity with that, um, and had done 6 months of neuro or of visual vision training with a
sure.
eye doctor in the area, but we were able to trace back. He had fallen off stairs when he was a little baby, and and able to identify he had a concussion with that. So we changed how we were treating him and doing more brain work and vision work. And we did about 2 months of work with him. And that summer, he ended up being the top reader in his library program.
Aw.
And so it's just seeing things like that where it's when you address the brain, things that you're not necessarily trying to treat get better.
Right.
Reading, if you think of reading is heavily involved with both brain processing, but visual processing.
Yeah.
And by correcting those, he's able to actually enjoy reading and he's picking it up and he's engaging and becoming who he really wants to be.
Right. Right. And it just breaks your heart when you see kids that are struggling so much. A kid wakes up and says, I want to throw a tantrum today.
Right.
I mean, and then knowing that yes, there's disobedience in tantrums, right?
Sure. Yep.
And as a parent what is and what's not.
Yes.
And then you're in the school system and then your kid gets labeled as, that kid.
Mhm.
And maybe you put them on medications and then we have all these kids running around on meds when they've got this neurological dysregulation going on. They probably have food sensitivities. They have so many things going on and, no blame on the parents in any way, shape, or form. It's what you don't know if you don't know. There's lots of things that I didn't know, when my daughter had her first concussion and stuff that I would
Mhm.
totally do different now.
Right.
Right? But it needs to get out there, and so I'm so glad that you are there's more people like you, there's more functional neurologists,
Mhm.
around the country now than there ever has been before, and there's such a need for it, so,
Yeah.
um
And I think the thing that I've learned in clinical practice is you have to listen to parents. Parents
oh my gosh,
intuitively
right?
know. Right? It's like no, and I mean, even coming back, you said, like, what you did with your daughter's first concussion and how you would do it differently, and a lot of times parents don't know. I had a
Yep,
lot of training. I had a lot of school specifically in the brain, and I still didn't know.
right.
And that's why and I kept fighting for my daughter, and my way to fight for her was to go back to school and learn more.
Mhm.
Right? And so that's where you have to learn that parents know what's going on with their child and trust them and let them actually lead the way. Not
Right.
just say, "I'm the expert, you have to do what I say." It's you are the expert in your child. I may be an
Mhm.
expert in the brain, but a parent is an expert in their child. And when they know that something is just off, I've learned to trust that and then to do everything I can to investigate why that might be
Right.
and then empower the parents to say, "Here's what I see is going on with your child. Here's how you can then step in and be part of the team of care."
Yeah, that is so good. Do you use any lasers and stuff in your practice?
Yep, we use a cold laser. Yeah, we use that a lot. There's a lot of really cool potential with cold lasers and a lot of research that's coming out. I could geek out for a while on that. But
Lasers
yeah,
are
we
so
use.
fun. Yeah.
There's actually some there the brand that we use Erconia is what it's called. But they're actually in the final stages of FDA clearance for approval for autism treatment.
Awesome.
So there's the and they actually went through the process once, and they got denied because the research was done in Cuba. Has really good tracking of autism,
Mhm.
much better than the US actually. And so that's why they did it in Cuba. Well, then because the results were showing so positive, the FDA wanted to see the site where they were doing the research, and the Cuban government wasn't letting the FDA in. And
Oh, goodness.
so then they said, "Oh, you've got to reproduce this here in the states." And so they've had to go through all the testing and everything again. But the results, they've already pulled the results, and they're looking the exact same. So
That's
it's
amazing.
it's really cool to see that
Yeah.
how much it impacts the brain.
Yeah, this is so good. Awesome. Anything else you want to leave the listeners with?
Oh boy, I mean, there's so much, right? But I would say if I could just give an encouragement that we've traded, like you said before, we've traded for comfort.
Mhm.
We've traded our own responsibility for comfort, and we've also traded our own responsibility for experts.
Mhm.
If there's anything that I can give somebody to move forward with is take responsibility for your own health. That you know your health better than anybody else. Now, other people might know more specifically on physiology or how the brain works or how the gut works or things like that, but you have to be in control of your own health. And if you're not taking responsibility for that, then nobody's going to be there to help you. It's just You're going to be passed around from one person to the next until an answer is found that is satisfying, but it's not necessarily the right answer. So take responsibility and pursue avenues that might seem out of the norm because, quite frankly, those are the ones that are probably getting results.
It's probably true, right? Anything that looks a little odd, a little hokey pokey might be working.
Right.
Yeah.
You have to look outside of the mainstream answers because, quite frankly, the mainstream is not giving us better health.
No, unfortunately not. Well, Joe, this has been an amazing conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your passion, your expertise. I know our listeners have gotten a lot out of this.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Awesome. And thank you everyone for listening. I appreciate each and every one of you. And if you loved this interview, and I know you probably know somebody that has a head injury, so make sure you like, subscribe, and share this video so this gets into more hands so that we
Mhm.
can have better recovery for everybody all across the world, right?
That's
And
right.
so I really appreciate you. God bless you. And I will see you in the next episode. Thanks for listening to Take Back My Brain. If today's episode helped you connect with hope or direction, I want you to follow the show, leave us a review, and share it with someone who needs it. And if you're ready to start your own healing journey, explore our courses and our coaching programs at lauriehammer.com/store. So until next time, remember, you cannot medicate away a nutrient deficiency, and healing your brain isn't just possible, it's powerful.